Camera opens on a woman in her late 50s sitting on a small porch swing, gazing at the sunset. She looks peaceful, but there's a hint of melancholy in her eyes. She holds a small slip of paper in her hands, occasionally glancing down at it with a slight smile. When I was younger, I used to dream about what I'd do if I ever struck it rich. Maybe buy a beach house, travel the world, or just sleep past 5 a.m. for once in my life. But after 30 years of working double shifts as a nurse, raising 3 kids on my own, and watching those same kids grow up and drift away, those dreams changed. She looks directly into the camera. My name is Martha Sullivan. 6 months ago, I won $47 million in the Michigan State Lottery. And not one of my 3 children knows about it. I'd love to know which corner of the globe you're watching from. And if this story speaks to you, make sure to subscribe. Tomorrow's video is one you absolutely can't miss. I never planned on being a single mother. When Jack and I got married right after nursing school, we had it all mapped out. He'd build his accounting practice. I'd work at Memorial Hospital until we had our first baby, then cut back to part-time. We'd have 2 kids, maybe 3, and retire to a lakeside cabin where Jack could fish, and I could finally read all those novels I'd been stockpiling. But life rarely follows the scripts we write for it. Jack died of an aneurysm when our youngest, Lily, was just 2 years old. Emma was 5, and Michael had just started first grade. One minute I was planning our summer vacation, and the next I was planning a funeral. Camera pans to show framed photos on the wall, a family of 5, then gradually shifting to just 4 in later photos. The first year after Jack died was a fog of grief, paperwork, and constant exhaustion. I'd work 12-hour shifts at the hospital, rush home to relieve my elderly neighbor, Mrs. Patterson, who watched the kids, then spend the evening cooking, cleaning, helping with homework, and trying not to collapse until all 3 were asleep. I'd often find myself sitting on the kitchen floor at midnight, sorting coupons and bills, wondering how we'd make it through another month. Insurance covered the mortgage for a year, but after that, everything fell on my shoulders. I picked up extra shifts in the ER, took weekend rotations, and even worked holidays for the extra pay. Every penny went toward keeping our modest house, putting food on the table, and saving whatever I could for the kids' education. Shot of Martha walking through her modest home, touching objects that tell the story of her life, children's height, marks on a doorframe, old-school photos, a wall of academic achievements. I remember the day Michael, my oldest, got his acceptance letter to Michigan State. I was more proud than I'd ever been, but that night, I sat in my car in the hospital parking lot and cried for 30 minutes straight. His scholarship would cover tuition but not room and board. I had to figure out how to come up with another $15,000 a year, money we simply didn't have. So I sold Jack's vintage car he'd been restoring when he died. I'd kept it all those years, telling myself that someday I'd finish it. For him. But Michael's future was more important than holding on to the past. The car brought in enough for his first year, and I picked up night shifts at a nursing home to cover the rest. 2 years later, Emma got into Northwestern, her dream school. I remortgaged the house. And when Lily set her sights on NYU's film program, I cashed in what little retirement savings I had managed to build. Close-up of Martha's hands, worn, with a simple wedding band she still wears. Was it hard? Of course. There were nights I ate nothing but saltine crackers so the kids could have proper meals. I wore the same 3 scrubs for a decade, patching holes and replacing elastic until the fabric was so thin you could almost see through it. I drove the same car until it finally died at 287,000 miles, stranding me on the highway in a blizzard after a night shift. But I never once let my children see how close to the edge we were living. I wanted them to focus on their futures, not worry about whether the electricity might get shut off. Whenever they called from college with excitement about a new opportunity, a study abroad program, an unpaid internship, a master's degree application, I'd swallow my panic and tell them, "That sounds wonderful, honey. We'll figure it out." And somehow we always did. I picked up extra work, sold family heirlooms, and once even participated in a clinical trial that left me sick for weeks, but paid enough to cover Emma's semester in Paris. Martha walking through a garden she's cultivated, touching plants with care. The kids graduated, one by one. Michael became an investment banker in Chicago. Emma landed a marketing job with a tech company in Seattle. Lily started as a production assistant in Los Angeles. I attended each graduation ceremony bursting with pride, sitting alone but clapping louder than anyone. I thought, this is what it was all for. This moment. Watching them walk across those stages in their caps and gowns, ready to take on the world. I had done my job. I had given them the foundations they needed to build their own lives. What I didn't realize was how completely they would build those lives without me in them. Martha sitting at kitchen table, looking at her phone. The calls became less frequent. Michael would talk for 5 minutes, mostly about market trends I didn't understand, before saying he had another call coming in. Emma would text occasionally with photos of her latest hiking adventure, but rarely respond to my replies. Lily, my baby, still called every few weeks, but our conversations had a rehearsed quality. She'd ask about my garden, I'd ask about her, work, and neither of us would say anything meaningful. I told myself this was normal. They were busy building careers, dating, and establishing themselves. I shouldn't expect to be the center of their worlds anymore. That's what I had raised them for, wasn't it? To be independent? But the holidays were the hardest. 3 years ago, all 3 of my children spent Christmas elsewhere for the first time. Michael went to his girlfriend's family in Vermont. Emma took a trip to Thailand with friends. Lily had to work, she said, though I later saw pictures on social media of her at a beach party. I spent Christmas Day working a double shift at the hospital so another nurse could be with her family. Then I came home, heated up a frozen dinner, and watched It's a Wonderful Life, alone in the dark. Camera shows Martha looking at a lottery ticket, turning it over in her hands. Last November, I stopped at a gas station on my way home from a particularly difficult shift. An 8-year-old boy had died on my watch, and I couldn't stop thinking about his mother's face when we gave her the news. On impulse, I bought a lottery ticket, something I almost never did. Jack used to buy them occasionally, calling it his retirement plan as a joke. I'd always rolled my eyes. I tucked the ticket into my wallet and forgot about it until 3 days later, when I heard on the radio that someone from our county had won the jackpot but hadn't come forward yet. With shaking hands, I pulled out the crumpled ticket and checked the numbers. And just like that, after 30 years of stretching every dollar until it screamed, I was suddenly worth $47 million. Martha looks up from the lottery ticket, a complex mix of emotions crossing her face. My first thought wasn't about what I would buy or where I'd travel. It was, I need to call the kids. I imagined their excitement, the family reunion we'd have, perhaps finally taking that vacation we'd never been able to afford when they were growing up. I dialed Michael's number first. It went straight to voicemail. I left a message asking him to call me back, that I had important news. Then I tried Emma. Same result. Lily at least answered, but she was in the middle of something and promised to call back later. She didn't. Over the next week, I called each of them several more times. Michael finally sent a text. Super busy with year-end reports. Everything okay? Emma eventually responded to my third voicemail with, Sorry, Mom, crazy at work. Can we catch up next month? Lily left a hurried message saying she was on set and would try me again soon. None of them asked what my important news was. None of them seemed particularly concerned that their mother might be calling for a real reason. And that's when a strange feeling came over me. A mixture of hurt, anger, and something else I couldn't quite name. For 3 decades, I had put their needs above my own without hesitation. I had sacrificed my youth, my health, my financial security, even my own dreams to ensure they could pursue theirs. Yet now they couldn't spare 10 minutes for a phone call with their mother. So I made a decision. I wouldn't tell them about the lottery. Not yet. First, I needed to understand who my children had really become when they thought there was nothing to gain from our relationship. What I discovered over the next few months would change everything I thought I knew about family, sacrifice, and what it means to truly love someone. Martha stands up from the porch swing, looking determined, and that's when things got interesting. Scene opens with Martha sitting in a lawyer's office. The contrast between the plush, elegant surroundings and her simple clothes is apparent. She looks slightly uncomfortable but determined. I'd never been in a private lawyer's office before. The kind with actual wood paneling and leather chairs that cost more than my monthly mortgage payment. After 30 years of cutting coupons and buying store-brand everything, just sitting there felt like trespassing. Mrs. Sullivan, you understand that as a lottery winner, you have the right to remain anonymous in our state? Mr. Holloway, the attorney, leaned forward. He was younger than I expected, maybe mid-40s, with kind eyes behind expensive glasses. Yes, and that's exactly what I want, I replied, clutching my purse. No press, no announcements, nothing that could lead back to me. He nodded, making notes. And regarding your family? You mentioned children? I felt a tightness in my chest. 3, but they don't know yet. And I'd like to keep it that way. For now. Mr. Holloway looked surprised, but professional enough not to comment directly. That's unusual, but entirely your prerogative. We'll need to establish some trusts and structures to maintain that privacy. Camera focuses on Martha's face as she considers her next words carefully. Mr. Holloway, for 30 years, I've been the safety net, the backup plan, the emergency fund for my children. I'd like to know who they are when they think I have nothing to offer them but my love. As I walked out of that office, I felt something I hadn't experienced in decades. Freedom. Not the freedom that comes from having money, though that was certainly new and strange, but the freedom to finally ask myself, what do I want? Martha walked slowly through a park, deep in thought. That night, I sat down and made a list. Not of things to buy or places to go, though I made those lists too. But a list of questions I needed answers to. Who were my children, really, as adults? What did they think of me when they thought I couldn't do anything for them? Did they ever think of me at all? And most importantly, who was I beyond being their mother? The next morning, I called Patricia, my friend from the hospital who'd retired to Florida 2 years earlier. We'd kept in touch with occasional phone calls, but between my work schedule and tight budget, I'd never been able to visit. Martha Sullivan, is that really you? Patricia's voice was warm with surprise. Don't tell me Memorial finally forced you into retirement. I laughed. Not exactly, but I've decided to take a little vacation. How would you feel about a house guest for a few days? There was a pause. You? Taking vacation days? Are you dying and not telling me? Just the opposite, I smiled to myself. I think I might finally be starting to live. Scene shifts to Martha packing a small suitcase, carefully selecting a few simple outfits. I didn't tell Patricia about the lottery. I wasn't ready to tell anyone yet, but I did book a flight to Tampa, not the cheapest economy seat in the back of the plane like I would have normally, but a comfortable seat with extra legroom. It felt indulgent, almost wrong. Before I left, I sent a group text to my children. Taking a small vacation to visit Patricia in Florida. We'll be back in a week. Love you. Michael responded first. Have fun. Just those 2 words. Emma replied a few hours later. Nice. Take pics. Lily sent a string of beach and sun emojis. None of them asked what had prompted this sudden trip. None of them seemed to find it strange that their mother, who hadn't taken a real vacation in over a decade, was suddenly flying to Florida. None of them asked if I needed a ride to the airport or offered to check on the house while I was gone. Camera shows Martha looking at her phone, a sad smile on her face. The trip to Florida was like waking up from a long sleep. Patricia showed me around her community, introduced me to her friends, took me to restaurants where we lingered over glasses of wine neither of us would have splurged on before retirement. We walked on the beach at sunset, and I felt the warm sand between my toes for the first time since my honeymoon with Jack. "You seem different," Patricia said one evening as we sat on her lanai, watching the pink-orange sky fade to purple. "More peaceful somehow." I sipped my iced tea. I think I finally realized something. I've spent my entire adult life being needed, but not necessarily wanted. Patricia frowned. "What do you mean?" "My children needed me to raise them, feed them, clothe them, and get them through college. The hospital needed me to work holidays and pick up extra shifts. Patients needed me to care for them. I watched a pelican dive into the water. But now that the kids don't need my financial support anymore, I'm not sure they want me in their lives at all." Patricia reached over and squeezed my hand. "That can't be true," I smiled sadly. When was the last time any of them called just to talk? Not because they needed money or advice or help moving, but just because they wanted to share their lives. With me? We sat in silence for a while, watching the stars appear. "So what are you going to do?" she finally asked. I took a deep breath. "I'm going to find out who Martha Sullivan is, beyond being Michael, Emma, and Lily's mom." Scene shifts to Martha returning home, walking into her modest house with new energy. When I got back from Florida, my house felt different, smaller, somehow. Or maybe I was just seeing it through new eyes. The faded wallpaper I'd been meaning to replace for 15 years. The sagging couch where I'd folded laundry while watching budget-friendly TV. The kitchen with its ancient appliances that I'd coaxed along year after year, because replacing them wasn't in the budget. My whole life has been shaped by limitations. Financial ones, mostly. But now those limitations were gone, and I felt almost dizzy with possibilities. I decided to start small. I hired a local handyman to make repairs I'd been putting off for years, fixing the leaky bathroom faucet, replacing the broken back step, patching the roof. Nothing extravagant, nothing that would raise eyebrows if any of my children happened to visit. But they didn't visit. In fact, after my return from Florida, weeks passed without any of them reaching out. I'd call or text occasionally, keeping my tone light, asking about their lives. Their responses, when they came, were brief and distracted. Martha is shown looking at old family photos, touching the faces in the frames. One night, scrolling through social media before bed, a habit I'd picked up to feel connected to my children's lives, I saw a post from Emma. She was at a restaurant I didn't recognize, raising a glass with friends I'd never met. The caption read, "Celebrating the big promotion. Blessed. Work hard. Play harder." I stared at the screen, my heart sinking. Emma had been promoted? When did this happen? Why hadn't she told me? I clicked through to her profile and realized there was so much I didn't know. She'd adopted a dog 3 months ago, a scruffy little terrier mix named Peanut. She was training for a half marathon. She'd started dating someone new, a woman with bright blue hair and a kind smile. My own daughter's life was unfolding without me even knowing the basic details. I checked Michael's page next. He rarely posted, but his girlfriend, now fiancée, according to their relationship status, tagged him regularly. They'd gotten engaged during a trip to Napa Valley 2 months ago. My son was getting married, and he hadn't even called to tell me. Lily's Instagram was the most active, full of behind-the-scenes photos from various film sets, pictures of sunsets from her apartment window, snapshots of meals in trendy restaurants. She looked happy, successful, and fulfilled, and completely detached from her roots. Close-up of Martha's face reflecting the blue light from her phone screen, tears welling in her eyes. I set down my phone and walked to my bedroom window, looking out at the night sky. The same stars had watched over this house when the children were small, when their laughter filled these rooms, when they couldn't fall asleep without me checking under their beds for monsters. Now they were adults with lives that barely intersected with mine. Lives they chose not to share with me. For years, I'd told myself they were just busy. Building careers took time and focus. They'd circle back when things settled down. But sitting there in the dark, scrolling through glimpses of lives they'd decided I didn't need to be part of, I couldn't avoid the truth any longer. They had moved on. Not just from this house or this town, but from me. Martha sinks onto her bed, shoulders slumped. That night, I cried for hours. Not the quiet, controlled tears I'd allowed myself when money was tight or when Jack first died, but deep, body-shaking, sobs that felt like they were being torn from some ancient place inside me. I cried for the mother who had sacrificed everything and now seemed forgotten. I cried for the woman who had put her own dreams on indefinite hold. I cried for all the birthdays spent working double shifts, all the school events attended alone, all the nights spent worrying about bills instead of sleeping. But when morning came, something had shifted inside me. As I watched the sunrise paint my bedroom wall gold, I made a decision. If my children had chosen lives that didn't include me, then perhaps it was time for me to choose a life that was truly my own. Martha stands at her window, face resolute in the morning light. I just had no idea how complicated that decision would become. Scene opens with Martha entering a real estate office, dressed slightly nicer than her usual attire, but still modest. The agent greets her warmly. "Mrs. Sullivan, it's lovely to meet. I'm Rebecca Taylor." The real estate agent extended her hand. She was about Emma's age, with a bright smile and an energy that filled the room. "Mr. Holloway spoke very highly of you." I shook her hand, still feeling like an imposter. "Please, call me Martha." "Martha, it is." "Now, Mr. Holloway mentioned you're looking for a condo in the Lakeshore area? That's quite a change from Maplewood." I nodded, trying to appear more confident than I felt. "I've lived in the same house for 35 years. It's time for something different." What I didn't say was how the emptiness of my house had started to echo. How I'd begun avoiding certain rooms. Michael's old bedroom that still had his high school pennant on the wall, the corner of the living room where Lily used to practice ballet, the kitchen table where Emma would spread out her science projects. Every space held memories that now felt like ghosts taunting me. Martha and the real estate agent touring a bright, modern condo with large windows overlooking a lake. The condo Rebecca showed me was nothing like my old house. No creaky floors or stubborn windows. No leaky faucets or outdated appliances. Just clean lines, smooth surfaces, and a view that made my breath catch. "The previous owner was an artist," Rebecca explained, gesturing to the wall of windows facing the lake. She said the changing light throughout the day was her inspiration. I stood by those windows, watching sunlight dance across the water. In that moment, I could almost see a different version of myself, one who woke up to this view every morning, who painted or wrote or simply sat in peaceful contemplation instead of rushing to work before dawn. "It's perfect," I said quietly. Rebecca looked surprised. "You don't want to see the other properties I lined up?" I shook my head. After a lifetime of agonizing over every purchase, weighing options, comparing prices, stretching dollars, the simplicity of making a decision based solely on what I wanted felt revolutionary. Martha signing paperwork at a closing table, looking both nervous and excited. "Congratulations, Mrs. Sullivan," the closing attorney said, sliding the final document toward me. "The condo is officially yours." I signed my name with trembling fingers. I'd paid cash, using a small portion of my lottery. Winnings, but we'd structured it through one of the trusts Mr. Holloway had established. On paper, it looked like I'd sold my old house, which I actually kept, another secret, and downsized to a more manageable space for retirement. A story no one would question. A change that wouldn't raise eyebrows. A perfect cover for the entirely new life I was quietly building. Martha standing alone in her empty new condo, phone in hand. That evening I texted my children. Making some changes, sold the house and bought a condo near Lakeshore. Smaller, easier to manage as I get older. Moving next week. Michael responded first this time. Wow, big move. Let me know if you need help with anything. It was the most he'd written to me in months. I waited for him to follow up with specific dates he could help, or questions about why I'd made such a significant decision without consulting them. Nothing came. Emma sent, "That's amazing, Mom. Lakeshore is so nice. Send pics when you're settled." Lily texted, "Whoa, major life changes. Good for you. Can't wait to see it sometime." Sometimes. Not, "I'll fly home to help you move," or "I'll visit as soon as you're settled." Just sometimes. An abstract future point that might never arrive. Split screen showing Martha looking at her phone while her children are shown in their respective lives. Michael at his office desk. Emma jogging with her dog. Lily on a film set, all busy with their own worlds. None of them called. None of them asked if I was okay making such a big change alone. None of them questioned how I could afford a condo in Lakeshore on a retired nurse's pension. They just accepted this major life decision with a few brief texts before returning to their own busy lives. And that's when I realized they didn't really see me at all. I existed in their minds as a static character, Mom, a background figure who had served her purpose and now hovered on the periphery of their lives. My feelings, dreams, struggles, triumphs, none of that registered as real to them. For the first time, I allowed myself to feel angry about it. Martha walking through a furniture store, running her hand along a beautiful modern sofa. Furnishing the condo became an unexpected journey of self-discovery. I'd never chosen furniture based purely on what I liked before. It had always been about practicality, durability, and budget. Could it withstand 3 active children? Would it still look decent after years of use? Was it on sale? Now, standing in a high-end furniture store with no budget constraints, I found myself drawn to pieces I never would have considered before. A sleek leather sofa in a rich cognac color, glass-top tables that wouldn't have survived a day in, a house with children, artwork that served no purpose except to please the eye. "Is this for your family home?" the salesperson asked as I contemplated a dining table. "No," I replied, surprising myself with my answer. "It's just for me. Just for me." 3 words I'd rarely strung together in my adult life. Martha in her new condo, now furnished tastefully, sitting with a cup of tea and looking out at the lake. It took 3 weeks to settle into my new space. I hired movers, another first, to bring the few cherished pieces I wanted to keep from my old life. Everything else I either stored, donated, or, in a few liberating cases, simply discarded. The condo came together like a reflection of the person I was only now getting to know, Martha Sullivan, not defined by motherhood or work or sacrifice, just Martha. I enrolled in a watercolor class at the community center nearby, joined a book club that met at the local library, started taking morning walks along the lakeshore, nodding to the same faces until nods became smiles, and smiles became conversations. Simple pleasures. Small joys. A life constructed entirely around my own rhythms and preferences. Martha answering her phone, looking surprised. "Mom, it's Michael." My heart leapt at the sound of my son's voice, a reflexive response after years of waiting for calls. That rarely came. "Michael, how are you? Is everything okay?" I asked, immediately concerned because an unprompted call from him was so unusual. "Yeah, everything's fine. Listen, Jessica and I set a date for the wedding, June 15th at the Wentworth Hotel downtown. I gripped the phone tighter. That's wonderful news. I'm so happy for you both. Thanks. There was an awkward pause. So, we're putting together the guest list, and Jessica wanted me to ask, how many people were you thinking of bringing? The question hung in the air between us. Not, will you help us plan? Or even, would you like to see the venue? Just an administrative inquiry about numbers for the guest list. Just me, I said, softly. Unless you'd like me to bring someone else? No, that's fine. Just checking. His voice sounded distracted. Oh, and Mom? Jessica's parents are hosting an engagement dinner next Saturday. They wanted to meet you before the wedding. I checked my calendar, empty except for my watercolor class. I'd love to come. Great. It's at 7, at Le Bernardin. Kind of fancy, so, you know. I did know. He was warning me to dress appropriately, to not embarrass him in front of his future in-laws who, from what little he'd shared, were quite wealthy. I'll find something suitable, I assured him, keeping my voice neutral despite the sting. After we hung up, I stood by my window, watching boats glide across the lake. It should have been a moment of connection, my son calling to include me in his wedding plans. Instead, it felt like being processed, another task on his wedding preparation checklist. Martha sitting in a coffee shop, thoughtful, as a barista brings her a latte. I decided not to tell my children about the watercolor class, or the book, club, or the fact that I'd made friends with the couple in the condo across the hall. I kept those parts of my new life private, like precious seeds I was growing away from their indifferent gaze. For years, I'd shared every detail of my life with them, my schedule, my health concerns, my small victories at work. Their response had usually been polite disinterest. Now, I found myself carefully curating what I shared, protecting my newfound joy from their casual dismissal. During our brief conversations, I asked about their lives instead. Michael's wedding plans, Emma's, new dog, Lily's latest project. I listened attentively, offered support when asked, but no longer volunteered information about my own transformation. Martha dressed elegantly, looking at herself in a mirror, clearly preparing for Michael's engagement dinner. The woman in the mirror looked different, not just because of the new dress, a simple but elegant navy blue sheath I'd purchased from a boutique in the Lakeshore shopping district. Not just because of the professional haircut that had shaped my silver-streaked hair into a stylish bob instead of my usual practical ponytail. No, the difference was in my eyes. The perpetual worry lines between my brows had softened. The tight set of my mouth had relaxed. I looked at peace. I wondered if Michael would notice. Martha arriving at a luxurious restaurant, being led to a private dining room, Le Bernardin was exactly as intimidating as I'd expected. Crystal chandeliers, impeccable service, the kind of understated opulence that speaks of old money and quiet privilege. At the hostess stand, I smoothed my dress and gave Michael's name. Ah, Mrs. Sullivan, the Harrington party is expecting you. Please follow me. As I walked through the restaurant, I caught my reflection in a mirrored wall. Shoulders back, chin up, steps measured and confident. Not a woman intimidated by luxury, but one who belonged in these surroundings as much as anyone. The private dining room door opened, and several faces turned toward me. Michael stood quickly, coming to greet me with a surprised expression I couldn't quite read. "Mom, you look different," he said, kissing my cheek. "Did you do something to your hair?" I smiled. Just a little change, nothing important. But as the evening progressed, I realized it wasn't just my son who noticed the difference. Jessica's parents, Richard and Diane Harrington, treated me with a respect that felt new and unfamiliar. They asked about my nursing career, my thoughts on healthcare policy, my impressions of the Lakeshore neighborhood. "Michael tells us you just moved to a condo there," Richard mentioned. "Smart investment. Property values in that area have been climbing steadily. It's a beautiful location, I replied simply. The view of the water makes every day feel special. Diane nodded approvingly. We've considered a pied-à-terre in that development ourselves. The amenities are quite impressive. Across the table, Michael was watching our exchange with a slightly furrowed brow. This wasn't going as he'd expected. His mother, the practical, frugal nurse who'd always been slightly out of place in upscale settings, was conversing with his future in-laws as if they were equals. Because, I realized with a start, we were. Close-up of Martha's face as she sips. Champagne. A small, knowing smile playing on her lips. The lottery hadn't just changed my financial situation. It had shifted something fundamental in how I moved through the world and how the world responded to me. And my son had noticed, even if he couldn't quite identify what was different. As I left the restaurant that night, Michael walked me to my car, another new purchase, modest but newer than anything I'd driven before. "Mom," he said hesitantly, "is everything okay with you? You seem, I don't know, different." I smiled and touched his cheek gently. "Everything is more than okay. Michael, I'm just finally figuring out who I am." He looked confused but nodded. "See you at the wedding," I said, getting into my car. What I didn't say was that by then, everything would be even more different. Because I'd made another decision, one that would force all three of my children to truly see me for the first time in years. Martha driving away, the restaurant lights fading behind her as she heads toward the lake, determination on her face. And I was finally ready for whatever would come next. Scene opens with Martha walking through a beautiful community, Arden stopping to chat with other volunteers as she tends to a flower bed. "Martha, these dahlias are thriving." "You've got quite the green thumb," called Eleanor, a silver-haired woman deadheading roses nearby. I smiled, wiping soil from my hands onto my gardening apron. My mother grew dahlias. I'd forgotten how much I enjoyed working with them until I joined the garden committee. 3 months had passed since I'd moved into my condo. Spring had melted into early summer, bringing with it a rhythm to my days that felt both new and somehow familiar, like returning to a version of myself I'd almost forgotten existed. Mornings were for lake walks and coffee with my neighbor Grace, who had become something of a confidant. Afternoons often found me volunteering at the community garden or attending my watercolor class. Evenings were for book club or dinners with new friends, or simply sitting on my balcony watching the thaw. Sunset with a glass of wine, simple pleasures, uncomplicated joys. The kind I'd always promised myself I'd enjoy someday when life wasn't so demanding. Martha checking her watch and saying goodbye to the other gardeners. "Don't forget, we're meeting with the landscape designer tomorrow about the butterfly garden," Eleanor reminded me as I gathered my tools. "I wouldn't miss it," I assured her. "But I have an appointment this afternoon I need to prepare for." What I didn't mention was that this appointment was with Mr. Holloway, my attorney. It was time to implement the next phase of my plan. Martha in Mr. Holloway's office, sitting across from him as he reviews documents. "You're sure about this, Mrs. Sullivan?" Mr. Holloway asked, looking up from the papers spread across his desk. "It's an unconventional approach," I nodded firmly. "I've given it a lot of thought. And please, after all these months, I think you can call me Martha." He smiled. "Martha, then. Well, your financial affairs are certainly in order. The trusts are established, your investments are diversified, and your anonymity as a lottery winner remains intact. From a legal standpoint, everything you're proposing is perfectly feasible." "But you still have concerns," I prompted, noting his hesitation. He leaned back in his chair. "Not concerned exactly. I just want to make sure you've considered all the emotional implications. Family dynamics can be complicated." I laughed softly. "Mr. Holloway, I raised 3 children on my own while working full-time. I'm well acquainted with complicated family dynamics." "Fair point." He gathered the documents and slid them into a folder. "We'll proceed as discussed then. The invitations will go out next week, and my office will handle any responses or inquiries." As I walked to my car afterward, I felt a curious mixture of anxiety and exhilaration. For decades, I'd been the one responding to other people's needs and decisions. Now I was setting events in motion that would force my children to respond to mine. Martha at home, addressing elegant envelopes, at her dining table. The invitation design was simple but elegant, cream-colored cardstock with embossed gold lettering. "Mrs. Martha Sullivan requests the pleasure of your company at a special anniversary celebration," they read, followed by the details of a dinner at the Grand Lake Hotel, one of the most exclusive venues in the region, on the evening of July 10th. I'd chosen the date carefully, 35 years to the day since Jack died. Not that I expected any of my children to remember that significance. To them, it would just be a random summer evening, and the anniversary would remain a mystery until the dinner itself. I addressed each envelope by hand, one to Michael and Jessica, one to Emma, one to Lily. Mr. Holloway's office would send additional invitations to the short list of people I genuinely wanted to celebrate with. Patricia from Florida, Grace from across the hall, my new friends from the garden committee and book club, even my watercolor instructor whose gentle encouragement had helped me discover a talent I never knew I possessed. I sealed each envelope deliberately, feeling the weight of the moment. This wasn't just an invitation to a dinner. It was an invitation to see me, truly see me, perhaps for the first time in years. Martha mailing the invitations, looking both nervous and determined. After dropping the envelopes in the mailbox, I waited. 3 days passed with no response from my children. 4 days. 5. On the 6th day, my phone rang. Michael's name flashed on the screen. "Mom?" His voice had an unusual edge to it. "We got your invitation." "I'm glad," I replied calmly. "I hope you and Jessica can make it." There was a pause. "Yeah, about that. What exactly is this anniversary? Dad's been gone for decades, and your retirement was last year, so—" I could almost see him squirming, trying to figure out what family milestone he'd forgotten. "It's a special date for me," I said simply. "I'd really like you to be there." "At the Grand Lake Hotel?" His tone shifted to disbelief. "Mom, do you know how expensive that place is? The dining room there has a 3-month waiting list." "I've taken care of all the arrangements," I assured him. "You just need to RSVP and show up." Another pause, longer this time. "Is everything okay with you?" First the condo in Lakeshore, then showing up at the engagement dinner looking like, well, different. And now this fancy invitation to some mysterious celebration at the most expensive hotel in the area? I smiled to myself. He was finally paying attention. "Everything is perfectly fine, Michael. Better than it's been in a very long time, actually." "But how are you paying for all this? Did you cash in your retirement account or something?" The worry in his voice almost sounded like genuine concern. "Almost. My finances are in order," I said, keeping my tone light. "Will you be there on the 10th? "Yeah, of course. Jessica and I will come." He hesitated. "Have you talked to Emma or Lily? Do they know what this is about?" "I've sent them invitations too. I'm sure they'll respond soon." After we hung up, I sat on my balcony watching boats cut white paths across the blue lake. For years, I'd interpreted my children's disinterest as busyness, their neglect as independence. I'd made excuses for them, blamed myself for expecting too much, convinced myself that their distance was normal and healthy. But Michael's reaction to the invitation had clarified something important. Their lack of interest in my life had never been about busyness. It had been about assumption. They had assumed I would always be the same predictable mother in the same predictable house, living the same predictable life, a static background character in the dynamic stories of their own lives. The unexpected. Invitation had disrupted that assumption, and now they were paying attention. Martha's phone ringing again. This time it's Emma. "Mom, what's going on?" Emma's voice was direct, as always. "Michael just called me freaking out about some fancy dinner you're hosting. He thinks you're having a midlife crisis or something." I laughed. "At 62, I think I'm a bit old for that particular crisis, don't you?" "You know what I mean." She sounded exasperated. "Michael says you're acting weird. Different clothes, new haircut, moving to Lakeshore, and now renting out the Grand Lake for some mystery dinner?" "Not the entire hotel, just the lakeside pavilion," I corrected her. "And yes, I've made some changes. That happens sometimes when you realize life is short and precious." "Mom." Her voice softened slightly. "Are you sick? Is that what this is?" "About, because if you are, we can—" "I'm perfectly healthy, Emma," I interrupted gently. "The dinner is to celebrate something important to me. I'd like you to be there." She sighed. "Fine, I'll be there. Peanut can stay with my neighbor." Peanut, her dog. She was planning to come alone. "You're welcome to bring someone if you'd like," I offered. "A friend, or that woman with the blue hair I saw in your photos. She has a lovely smile." There was a startled silence on the line. You saw Zoe on my Instagram?" "I do follow you on social media, dear, even if I don't always comment. I didn't think you—" She trailed off. "Didn't think I noticed? Or didn't think I'd approve?" Another pause. "Both, I guess." My heart ached a little. "Emma, I've always wanted you to be happy. Who you love has never changed that." "Oh." Her voice sounded smaller somehow. "Well, thanks. Maybe I will bring Zoe then. She's been wanting to meet you." After we hung up, I felt a curious mixture of sadness and hope. My daughter had assumed I wouldn't approve of her relationship, had hidden someone important from me because she thought I wouldn't notice or care. How had we drifted so far apart that she could think that? Martha in a high-end boutique, trying on dresses with the help of a stylist. The dress for the dinner was another indulgence. A floor-length gown in deep emerald that made my silver-streaked hair look intentional rather than merely inevitable. The boutique owner, a woman about my age named Vivian, had helped me select it. "Your children won't recognize you," she declared as I twirled in front of the three-way mirror. "That's rather the point," I admitted. My phone buzzed with a text from Lily. "Got your invitation? Sounds mysterious. I can fly in that morning but need to leave the next day for a shoot. Can't wait to see the new place. Love you." At least she was coming, and she'd punctuated her message with hearts instead of just professional courtesy. Of my 3 children, Lily had always been the most emotionally expressive, the most likely to reach out just to chat. Her growing distance over the past few years had perhaps hurt the most. Martha meeting with the event planner at the Grand Lake Hotel, reviewing details for the dinner. "The floral arrangements will be placed here," the event planner explained, indicating spots on the diagram of the pavilion. "And we've selected the champagne you requested for the toast." I nodded, reviewing the menu one last time. Everything had to be perfect. Not because I needed to impress anyone, but because the evening represented something profound. A declaration of independence, yes, but also an invitation to connection. A chance to redefine my relationships with my children on new terms. "And you mentioned photographs?" the planner prompted. "Yes." I handed her a USB drive. "These need to be displayed on screens around the room during the dessert course." She nodded, making a note. "Will there be a speech?" I smiled. "Definitely." Martha back at home, looking at an old photo album. That night, I pulled out the albums. I'd carefully preserved through decades and moves. Photos of Michael's first steps, Emma's soccer championships, Lily's dance recitals, their graduations, birthdays, achievements. A visual record of lives I'd witnessed and supported every step of the way. I flipped to the oldest album, pictures of Jack and me when we were young, full of hopes and plans. Our wedding day. the house we'd bought together, him holding newborn, Michael with a terrified, awestruck expression. I traced his face with my fingertip. "I wish you could see them now, Jack," I whispered. "They've become such accomplished adults. I just don't know if they've become kind ones." The silence of my empty condo seemed to emphasize the weight of that question, Martha writing in a journal on her balcony with the lake view behind her. As the day of the dinner approached, I found myself growing calmer rather than more anxious. I'd spent my entire adult life worrying about others, their needs, their futures, their happiness. Now, for perhaps the first time, I was focused on my own path forward. Whatever happened at the dinner, I knew this much was true. I would never, again, make myself small to accommodate my children's indifference. I would never again accept scraps of attention as if they were feasts. I would never again measure my worth by how much others needed me. The woman I had become in these past months, the woman who walked by the lake at dawn, who painted watercolors that captured the play of light on water, who tended flowers and read novels and laughed with new friends. She was not a supporting character in someone else's story. She was the protagonist of her own. Martha looking at her reflection the night before the dinner, a sense of peace and determination on her. Facing tomorrow night, my children will finally meet her. Scene opens with an exterior shot of the Grand Lake Hotel at sunset. The building is illuminated beautifully, with the lake shimmering behind it. Guests in formal attire are arriving. The Grand Lake Hotel stood like a glittering jewel against the darkening sky, its windows blazing with warm light that spilled onto the manicured lawns sloping down to the water. Valets in crisp uniforms darted between luxury vehicles, while guests in evening wear made their way into the grand entrance. I arrived early, heart beating a strange rhythm of excitement and apprehension. The hotel manager greeted me personally, escorting me to the lakeside pavilion where everything had been arranged exactly as I'd specified. Round tables draped in ivory linen, centerpieces of white roses and blue hydrangeas, delicate place cards in silver holders. "Is there anything else you need, Mrs. Sullivan?" he asked. I surveyed the room, taking in the soft lighting, the gleaming crystal, the floor-to-ceiling windows showcasing the lake. "It's perfect, thank you." Martha standing alone in the pavilion, touching a place card with Michael's name on. 35 years ago today, I stood in a hospital corridor as a doctor explained that Jack was gone. An aneurysm, sudden and catastrophic. One moment he'd been heading to work, kissing me goodbye at the door. The next, he was never coming home again. I'd been 32 years old with 3 small children and an uncertain future. That day had marked the end of one life and the beginning of another, a life defined by sacrifice, resilience, and a love so fierce it consumed nearly everything else. Tonight marked another turning point, another ending, another beginning. Guests begin to arrive. Martha greets Patricia from Florida with a warm hug. "Martha Sullivan, look at you," Patricia exclaimed, holding me at arm's length. If I hadn't known to look for that smile, I might not have recognized you. I laughed, smoothing the emerald fabric of my gown. It's amazing what a good night's sleep and a little peace of mind can do. One by one, my new friends arrived. Grace from across the hall, Eleanor and the other garden committee members, Jane from my book club, David, my watercolor instructor. Each seemed slightly surprised by the elegance of the event, but genuinely delighted to be included. Martha looking anxiously toward the entrance. At 7:15, 15 minutes after the invitation time, there was still no sign of my children. I tried to focus on my guests, making introductions, ensuring everyone had champagne, but my eyes kept drifting to the entrance. "They'll be here," Patricia murmured, squeezing my hand. "They wouldn't miss it." At 7:25, Michael and Jessica arrived, both looking polished and slightly uncomfortable. Michael scanned the room with a furrowed brow, clearly trying to decipher what kind of event he'd walked into. When he spotted me, His eyes widened slightly. Michael approaches Martha, looking confused. "Mom? Is that you?" He leaned in to kiss my cheek, an automatic gesture that didn't quite mask his bewilderment. "You look... wow." Jessica smiled warmly. "That color is stunning on you, Martha. And what a beautiful venue." Before I could respond, there was a commotion at the entrance. Emma had arrived with Zoe, her blue-haired girlfriend, who was gazing around the pavilion with unabashed delight. Emma approached cautiously, as if entering unfamiliar territory. "Mom, what is all this?" I embraced her, then extended my hand to Zoe. "You must be Zoe. I'm so glad Emma brought you tonight." Zoe beamed, shaking my hand enthusiastically. "Mrs. Sullivan, your daughter has told me so much about you. This place is incredible and you look absolutely gorgeous." Emma was still glancing around, spotting familiar faces and many more strangers. "Seriously, Mom, what's going on? Who are all these people?" "Friends," I said simply. "We should find our seats. I believe dinner is about to be served." Martha, looking anxiously at her watch. By 7:40, Lily still hadn't arrived. I instructed the staff to begin serving the first course, trying to hide my disappointment. Of all my children, I'd hoped Lily would be the one to arrive on time to show genuine interest. Just as the servers were presenting the elegant appetizers, the pavilion doors opened once more. Lily rushed in, slightly breathless, her stylish jumpsuit suggesting she'd come directly from the airport. "Mom, I'm so sorry I'm late. The flight was delayed, and traffic was a nightmare, and..." She stopped mid-sentence, taking in the scene before her. "Whoa!" Lily embracing Martha, looking around in amazement. "You look beautiful, Mom," she said with genuine surprise in her. And this is something else. What are we celebrating?" I smiled. "All will be revealed. Your seat is next to Emma's. We've just started." Throughout the appetizer course, I could feel my children watching me as I moved confidently between tables, chatting with my new friends, making sure everyone was comfortable. Their expressions ranged from confusion to concern to curiosity. Shot of Martha standing to address her guests as the main course is cleared. "Before dessert is served," I announced, tapping my glass gently, "I'd like to thank you all for coming tonight. Some of you I've known for decades." I smiled at Patricia. Others I've had the pleasure of meeting more recently. I nodded to Grace, Eleanor, and my other new friends. "And some of you..." My eyes found Michael, Emma, and Lily seated together at their table. "Some of you I've known all your lives, even if we've grown somewhat distant in recent years." A hush fell over the room. My children exchanged glances. 35 years ago today, I lost my husband Jack, the father of my children. It was the hardest day of my life, but also the beginning of a journey that made me who I am. I saw Lily's face crumple slightly. She, at least, had realized the significance of the date. For 3 decades after that day, I defined myself primarily as a mother and a nurse. Those were roles I treasured, responsibilities I never resented. But when my children grew up and my career ended, I discovered something unexpected. I paused, looking directly at my children now. I discovered that somewhere along the way, I'd forgotten how to be Martha. Just Martha. Not someone's mother or caregiver or safety net. Just a woman with her own dreams, preferences, and possibilities. Screens around the room light up with photographs. Not just old family photos, but recent images of Martha in her new life, painting by the lake, working in the garden, laughing with her new friends. The past 6 months have been transformative. For me, I've made new friends, discovered new passions, and redefined what happiness means in this chapter of my life. My children were staring at the photographs, seeing a version of their mother they'd never met before. But there's another change I haven't shared with you, something that altered my perspective in ways I never anticipated. Martha takes a deep breath. Last November, I won the Michigan State Lottery. $47 million to be exact. The room went absolutely silent. My children's faces froze in expressions of shock. I didn't tell you immediately because when I tried to call with the news, none of you seemed to have time for me. Calls went to voicemail. Messages received brief replies. It had been months since any of you had reached out just to check on me, to see how I was doing, to share your lives with me beyond the most perfunctory updates. Michael opened his mouth as if to protest, then closed it again. So I made a decision. Before telling you about the money, I wanted to understand who we had become to each other, who you were when you thought I had nothing material to offer you, who I could be when freed from financial constraints for the first time in my adult life. I gestured to the room around us. What I discovered surprised me. I found that I love watercolor painting, that I have a knack for gardening, that I enjoy the company of people who see me as a person with thoughts and experiences worth sharing, not just as a mother whose primary value lies in what she can do for others. Camera pans across the faces of Martha's children, each showing a complex mix of emotions. I discovered that I am more than the roles I've played, more than the sacrifices I've made, more than the needs I've fulfilled for others. I squared my shoulders, looking directly at my children now, and I discovered something about our relationship too, something painful but important. Lily was crying silently now. Emma sat rigid, her face unreadable. Michael stared at the table, unable to meet my eyes. I discovered that somewhere along the way, you stopped seeing me, really seeing me. I became background noise in your lives, someone whose calls could be ignored, whose birthday could be forgotten, whose major life decisions warranted nothing more than a brief text message. Close-up of Martha's face, emotional but composed. I'm not saying this to hurt you. I'm saying it because I love you too much to let this pattern continue. I want authentic relationships with my children, relationships based on genuine connection, not obligation or convenience. I lifted my champagne glass. So tonight we're celebrating two things. We're honoring the 35 years since I began my journey as a single mother, years that shaped all of us in profound ways. And we're marking the beginning of a new chapter, one where I hope we can rebuild our connections as adults who choose to be in each other's lives, not because of duty or habit, but because of love and genuine interest. Guests raised their glasses, some with tears in their eyes. To new beginnings, I said simply. The room echoed with, to new beginnings, but my children remained silent, their glasses untouched. As dessert is served, Martha moves to sit at her children's table. You won the lottery? Michael finally managed, his voice barely above a whisper. $47 million? I nodded. After taxes, about $32 million. I've set up trusts, made investments. Mr. Holloway, my attorney, has been very helpful. Why didn't you tell us? Emma demanded, her voice tight with emotion. We're your children. I tried to call. I reminded her gently. The day I found out, all three of you were too busy to talk. Lily wiped her eyes. I thought it was just, I don't know, something minor. You always say everything's fine, even when it isn't. And that's partly on me, I acknowledged. I got used to not burdening you with my problems, to being the strong one, the giver, the supporter. But relationships can't survive when they're that one-sided. Jessica, who had been silent throughout, suddenly spoke up. When my grandmother got sick last year, I spent every weekend driving to see her. She wasn't always easy to talk to, but she was my grandmother. She looked at Michael. You never once offered to come with me. Michael flushed. That was different. We were busy with work and... It wasn't different, Jessica interrupted quietly. It was exactly what your mother was talking about. Zoe squeezes Emma's hand supportively. Emma seemed to be struggling with multiple emotions at once. So all of this, the condo, the clothes, this dinner, it was what, a test? To see if we deserved your money? I shook my head firmly. No, Emma. It was a journey to figure out who I am outside of being your mother. And yes, to understand what our relationship has become. The money didn't change who you are or how you treat me. It just gave me the freedom to notice patterns I'd been too busy surviving to see before. Martha reaches out to take Lily's hand. When was the last time any of you called just to ask how I was doing? Not to check if I could watch the dog or make dinner or help with wedding arrangements. Just to connect, person to person. None of them answered. The silence was enough. That's what I want to change, I continued softly. Not with money, though yes, I plan to share my good fortune with you, but with honesty and mutual respect. Michael cleared his throat. So, what happens now? I smiled. Now we enjoy this beautiful dessert. We celebrate with these wonderful people who have become important parts of my life. And tomorrow, if you're willing, we begin the work of really seeing each other again. Servers bringing elaborately plated desserts to the tables. And the money? Emma asked, unable to help herself. The money is mine, I said firmly. I've arranged for each of you to receive a gift, a significant one. But the bulk of my winnings will fund my life and the causes I care about. I paused. My relationship with you isn't contingent on financial support anymore. That chapter is closed. Lily reached for my hand. I'm sorry, Mom. I didn't realize. I've been so caught up in my own stuff. I know, sweetheart. We all get caught up sometimes. Martha stands to mingle with her other guests again. Think about what I've said. We'll talk more tomorrow. For now, I'd like you to meet my friends, the people who've helped me discover who Martha Sullivan really is. As I walked away from their table, I felt lighter somehow. The truth had been spoken. The patterns had been named. What happened next would depend on choices, theirs and mine. Martha laughing with her friends, truly enjoying herself, while her children watch from their table with complex expressions. Whatever those choices might be, I knew this much. I would never again make myself small enough to fit inside someone else's limited perception of me. I would never again accept crumbs from the people who should be offering bread. The woman in the emerald dress, with her silver-streaked hair and straight spine, was no longer just someone's mother. She was Martha Sullivan, and she was just getting started. Scene opens the morning after the dinner. Martha is sitting on her balcony at the condo, watching the sunrise over the lake, coffee mug in hand. The morning after a revelation is a curious thing. The world looks exactly the same sun, rising over the same lake, creating the same golden path across the water. But everything feels different. I sipped my coffee slowly, replaying the previous night's events in my mind. The shock on my children's faces, the painful truths finally, spoke aloud. The weight that had lifted from my shoulders with each honest word. The dinner had ended gracefully enough. My children had made awkward small talk with my new friends, accepting the congratulations of strangers on their mother's good fortune with strained smiles. When the evening concluded, each had hugged me woodenly, promising to call the next day. Now it was the next day, and I was waiting. Not anxiously, as I once might have done, checking my phone every few minutes, making excuses for their silence, trying to anticipate their needs before they expressed them. Just waiting, calm, present, ready for whatever might come. Martha's phone rings. She looks at it. It's Michael. Good morning, Michael, I answered, keeping my voice neutral. Mom? He sounded tired, as if he hadn't slept much. Can Jessica and I come over? To see your new place, I mean? And talk. I smiled slightly. Of course. How about 11? There was a brief pause. Actually, I was thinking sooner, if that's okay. I checked the clock. It was barely 7:30 a.m. "I'll put on another pot of coffee." Martha opening her door to Michael and Jessica, who look uncomfortable but determined. Michael had never been an early riser. As a teenager, getting him out of bed before noon on weekends had required multiple attempts and occasional bribery. Yet here he was at 8 a.m. on a Saturday, standing in my doorway with shadows under his eyes and tension in his shoulders. "Come in," I said, stepping aside. "The view is best in the morning light." They entered cautiously, as if expecting traps. Jessica murmured appropriate compliments about the decor as I led them through to the living area, with its wall of windows facing the lake. "This is beautiful, Mom," Michael said, sounding genuinely impressed. "Really beautiful." "Thank you." "Coffee?" They nodded, and I busied myself in the kitchen while they settled on the sofa. Through the open concept space, I could see them whispering to each other, Jessica squeezing Michael's hand encouragingly, Martha bringing coffee to the living area, sitting across from them. "So," I said, once we all had steaming mugs in hand, "you wanted to talk?" Michael set his coffee down untouched. "Last night. It was a lot to take in," I nodded. "I understand that. The lottery thing, obviously. That's huge. But the other stuff you said." He ran a hand through his hair, a gesture so reminiscent of his father that my heart ached momentarily. "About us not seeing you. Not really being part of your life anymore." It wasn't easy to say, I acknowledged quietly. But it was true. Jessica leaned forward slightly. "Martha, I hope you know I never meant to come between Michael and you. I always encouraged him to call, to visit." I held up a hand, stopping her. "This isn't your responsibility, Jessica. And it isn't just about Michael. All three of my children made choices about how much of themselves to share with me, and how much of my life to participate in." Michael flinched slightly at that. "We've been busy building our careers, our own families. That's normal, isn't it? To grow up and move on?" "Growing up? Yes. Moving on, certainly." I looked him directly in the eyes. "Forgetting the person who raised you, who shaped your earliest understanding of the world? Treating her like an obligation rather than someone worthy of genuine interest and connection? That's a choice, Michael. A hurtful one." Close-up of Michael's face as he processes this. "I never meant to," he began, then stopped. "I didn't realize." "I know," I said gently. "And that's partly my fault. I never demanded more. I accepted whatever scraps of attention you offered because I didn't want to be a burden. I'd spent so many years being strong. For all of you, it became a habit I couldn't break." Jessica was nodding slowly. "My mother does the same thing. Pretends everything is fine even when it isn't. Says she doesn't need help even when she's struggling. It's what our generation was taught to do," I said with a small smile. "Particularly mothers. Never complain, never explain. Just keep going." Michael set his jaw in that determined way he'd had since childhood. "So what happens now? With the money, I mean. You mentioned gifts last night, but then said the bulk would stay with you." Martha's expression turned slightly disappointed. "Is that what you came to discuss at 8 in the morning? The money?" Michael had the grace to look ashamed. "No. Well, not only that. I'm trying to understand everything." I sighed. "I've established trusts for each of you. $1 million each, to be released in stages over the next 5 years. Not enough to quit your jobs, but enough to provide security, opportunities, choices you might not otherwise have had." Their eyes widened. "That's incredibly generous," Jessica whispered. "It's what feels right to me," I said simply. "Beyond that, I'll be using my winnings to secure my own future and support causes I care about. The specifics aren't important right now." Martha standing, walking to the windows. "What's important is whether we can rebuild genuine relationships with each other. Not based on what I can do for you, or what you feel obligated to do for me, but on who we actually are as people. Michael nodded slowly. I'd like that. So would I. But it will take work from all of us. Real effort, real attention. I turned to face them again. When was the last time you asked me about my dreams, Michael? My interests? My thoughts on anything more significant than what to cook for dinner? He opened his mouth, then closed it again, unable to recall such a conversation. Exactly. For years, I've asked about your work, your friends, your hobbies. I've listened to your opinions on politics, sports, and financial markets. I've shown interest in your life, while you showed almost none in mine. Martha's phone rings. It's Emma. Hello, Emma, I answered, keeping my eyes on Michael. Mom, can Zoe and I come over? Her voice sounded strained. We need to talk about last night. Michael and Jessica are already here. Why don't you join us? After I hung up, Michael leaned forward. Mom, I'm sorry. I really am. I just got so caught up in my own life, and you always seemed, I don't know, like you were fine with things the way they were. Because I never complained, never demanded more, I asked quietly. Michael, people shouldn't have to demand basic consideration from those who claim to love them. He flinched again, but nodded slowly. You're right. Doorbell. Rings. Emma and Zoe arrive. Emma entered like a storm, all nervous energy and barely contained emotion. Zoe followed more cautiously, offering me a warm smile as she introduced herself properly. Your home is gorgeous, she said genuinely. That view is absolutely incredible. Thank you, I replied, showing them the seats. Coffee, or I can make tea if you prefer. As I prepared their drinks, I could hear them talking in low voices with Michael and Jessica, comparing notes perhaps, or strategizing how to approach me. I smiled to myself, remembering how they used to do the same thing as children when trying to convince me to let them stay up late or get a puppy. Martha rejoining the group with more coffee. Lily texted, Emma announced as I sat down. Her flight isn't until this afternoon. She's on her way over too. I nodded, unsurprised. Good. Then we can all talk together. Mom? Emma began, her directness in full force. I need to ask you something, and I want you to be honest. Always. She took a deep breath. Were you testing us? With the lottery thing? To see if we'd come running once we knew you had money. I considered her question carefully. Not testing, exactly. More observing, learning. I wanted to understand who we had become to each other without the distortion of sudden wealth changing the picture. But you didn't trust us enough to tell us, she pressed. It wasn't about trust, Emma. It was about clarity. For 30 years, I defined myself as your mother, the provider, the caregiver, the safety net. When you all moved on with your lives and I retired, I lost both those defining roles within months of each other. I needed to figure out who Martha was without them. Doorbell rings again. Lily arrives. Lily burst in with her usual dramatic energy, though her eyes were red-rimmed from crying. Mom! She embraced me tightly. I barely slept. I kept thinking about everything you said last night, and I'm so sorry. I never meant to make you feel invisible or unimportant. I hugged her back, then gently directed her to the last empty seat. I know none of you intended to hurt me, I said, looking at each of them in turn. But intentions and impact are different things. The fact remains that all three of you gradually removed me from the center of your lives to the periphery. And while that's natural to some extent as you build your own adult lives, the degree of disconnection wasn't healthy or kind. Close-up of all three children's faces, showing various stages of realization and remorse. Do you remember when you got promoted last year, Emma? I found out through your Instagram post? Or Michael, when you got engaged? Jessica's mother called me to discuss wedding plans before you even told me yourself. And Lily, the indie film you worked on that won that festival award? I read about it in an article someone shared with me. They exchanged glances, the weight of these examples settling on them. We just got caught up, Lily said softly, in our own stuff. For months at a time? Years, even? I shook my head. That's not getting caught up. That's a pattern of treating someone as if they don't matter. Martha standing, walking around the room as she speaks. The lottery win forced me to confront some uncomfortable truths, not just about how you treated me, but about how I allowed myself to be treated. I realized I'd spent so many years putting everyone else first that I'd forgotten how to value myself, how to demand the respect and consideration I deserved. I paused by a small painting on the wall, one of my own watercolors from my class. These past 6 months have changed me. I've discovered parts of myself I never knew existed. I've made friends who see me as a complete person with thoughts and experiences worth sharing, not just as someone's mother or former caregiver. I turn to face them again, and I've learned that I won't go back to being an afterthought in your lives. I won't accept occasional texts instead of real connection. I won't pretend that's enough anymore. The children exchange glances, then Michael speaks. Mom, we want to do better. We all talked about it last night after dinner. We know we've been negligent. Emma nodded vigorously. And not just since the lottery or the move. For years, probably. Definitely for years, Lily admitted quietly. I think we just got used to you always being there, always being strong, never needing anything. From us? It was easy to take that for granted. It shouldn't have been, I said, not unkindly. But I understand how it happened. The question is whether we can create something better going forward. Martha sitting down again, looking at her children, intently. I'm not asking for daily calls or obligatory visits. What I want is authenticity, real interest in each other's lives, mutual respect and consideration. All three nodded solemnly. And I want you to understand that while I'll always be your mother and love you unconditionally, my life is no longer centered around yours. I have my own friends, interests, and priorities now. Like watercolor painting? Lily asked, nodding toward the small artwork. I smiled. Yes, and gardening, book club, and community volunteering. You painted that? Emma asked, looking impressed. It's really good. Thank you. I've discovered I have quite a passion for it. Martha gathering empty coffee cups. I think we should take some time to process everything. Maybe we'll meet again in a few days? Separately, perhaps, so we can have more personal conversations. They agreed readily, each making plans to see me individually over the coming week. As they prepared to leave, Lily hung back slightly. Mom, can I ask something else? Of course. That money you're giving us, the trust funds, is that conditional? Are we better about staying in touch? I looked at her steadily. No, Lily. That's already arranged, regardless of what happens between us going forward. But our relationship, how close we become, how much of our lives we share with each other, that is conditional. On mutual effort, respect, and genuine care. She nodded slowly. That seems fair. Martha hugging each child goodbye at the door. After they left, I returned to my balcony, watching boats cut through the morning light on the lake. I felt drained but hopeful. The truth had been spoken. The patterns had been named. Now we would see what choices we all made going forward. My phone buzzed with a text from Grace across the hall. Brunch at Lakeside Cafe? Eleanor and Jane are coming too. I smiled, typing back an immediate, yes. This was the most unexpected gift the lottery had given me. Not the financial freedom, though that was certainly transformative, but the opportunity to rediscover myself, to build a life that wasn't defined solely by what I could do for others, but by what brought me joy, connection, and purpose. Martha getting ready to meet her friends, putting on a bright scarf. Whatever happened with my children, whether we managed to rebuild stronger, healthier relationships or not, I knew one thing with absolute certainty. I would never again make myself small enough to fit inside someone else's limited perception of me. The woman heading out to meet her friends, for brunch, with paint sometimes under her fingernails and silver in her hair, was no longer just someone's mother. She was Martha Sullivan, and her story was still unfolding. Scene opens at an upscale restaurant. Martha is seated at a table, looking elegant but comfortable. Michael enters, checking his watch. He's right. On time. "You look nice," Michael said as he sat down across from me. He seemed nervous, smoothing his tie repeatedly. "Thank you. I've been experimenting with a new style. Your fiancée has excellent taste. She recommended this place." I smiled, trying to put him at ease. It had been 3 days since our group conversation at my condo. True to their word, each of my children had reached out to arrange individual meetings. Michael had suggested lunch at this new restaurant downtown, territory that was neutral but impressive, perhaps his way of acknowledging my new status. The waiter appeared, and Michael ordered confidently. Clearly he'd been here before. I noted with interest that he didn't automatically order for me as he might have in the past, another small sign that something had shifted. Martha and Michael sitting with their meals, an initially awkward silence between them. "So," he began, folding and unfolding his napkin. "I've been thinking a lot about what you said, about us not really seeing you." I nodded, giving him space to continue. "I talked to Jessica about it for hours afterward. She, had some pretty tough insights." He grimaced slightly. "She pointed out that I treat our relationship the same way I treat most of my client relationships. Transactional, scheduled, agenda-driven." "That's an interesting observation," I said carefully. "It's embarrassing, is what it is." He set down his fork. "Mom, when did I become this person? This calculating, self-centered guy who can't even call his mother without a reason?" Close-up of Martha's face, showing compassion but not rushing to comfort him. "You've always been focused, Michael. Even as a little boy, you set goals and pursued them single-mindedly. It's made you very successful professionally. But a pretty lousy son," he added quietly. I reached across the table and took his hand. "Not lousy, just distracted by your own life, your own priorities. That's natural to some extent. But relationships need tending, like gardens. They wither without regular care." He nodded, squeezing my hand before releasing it. "I want to do better. I'm not sure how exactly." "Well," I said thoughtfully, "you could start by telling me something about yourself that has nothing to do with work, money, or the wedding. Something I don't already know." Michael looked surprised, then thoughtful. Michael paused, clearly searching. His mind. The fact that this was difficult spoke volumes. "I've been learning to play the guitar," he finally said. "For about 6 months now. I keep it in a closet at home because I'm still terrible at it, and I was embarrassed for Jessica to hear me practicing." I blinked in surprise. "The guitar? Why? Do you remember Mr. Reeves who lived next door when I was growing up? He used to sit on his porch in the evenings and play. I always thought it looked so peaceful." He shrugged, looking slightly embarrassed. "Banking is stressful. I needed something completely different." I smiled, genuinely delighted by this revelation. "I had no idea. That's wonderful, Michael." "Your turn," he said, looking more relaxed. "Tell me something I don't know about you, Martha." Considering her response, "I'm thinking of going to Italy in the fall," I said. "A watercolor painting retreat in Tuscany. 2 weeks of landscapes, vineyards, ancient villages." "By yourself?" he asked, sounding surprised. With Eleanor and Jane from my painting class. We've become good friends. I took a sip of water. It would be my first trip to Europe. Wow. That sounds amazing, Mom. His smile was genuine. I'd love to see your paintings sometime. I'd like that, I replied softly. The conversation flowed more easily after that exchange. We spoke about his guitar lessons, my painting, classes, books we'd read recently, a documentary series we'd both coincidentally been watching. Not once did he check his phone or glance at his watch. Not once did I feel the need to ask about his career or finances. By the time dessert arrived, something had shifted between us. We were no longer mother and son going through obligatory motions. We were two adults, discovering each other anew. Scene transitions to a garden center. Martha and Emma are walking between rows of plants. I still can't believe you're into gardening now, Emma said, watching me select a potted lavender plant. You used to say you couldn't keep a cactus alive. I laughed. People change, Emma. I've discovered I love working with plants. It's meditative, watching something grow under your care. Emma had suggested meeting at the large garden center near Lakeshore. I'd been surprised by her choice. She'd never shown interest in plants before, but touched by the effort to connect with my new interests. She picked up a small succulent, examining it closely. Zoe would love this for her desk at work. You should get it for her, I suggested. Small gestures mean a lot in relationships. Emma glanced at me sharply, then nodded. You're right. They do. Emma and Martha sitting at a small cafe inside the garden center, surrounded by greenery. I need to apologize, Emma said abruptly, setting down her iced tea. For assuming you wouldn't approve of Zoe, for not telling you about her sooner. I considered my response carefully. Why did you think I wouldn't approve? She fidgeted with her napkin. I don't know. You never said anything homophobic, ever. But you're from a different generation, and we never really talked about these things. Because you never brought them up, I pointed out gently. Emma, I've been a nurse for 30 years. I've cared for people from all walks of life, all kinds of relationships. Love is love. She nodded. I know that's stupid now, but there was this disconnect. Like I had this image of you stuck in my head from when I was a teenager, and I never updated it even as I changed and grew. That's exactly it, I said, leaning forward. You still see me as the mother who packed your lunches and enforced curfews, not as a complete person who has evolved just as you have. Close-up of Emma's face as this realization hits her. Is that what you meant at the dinner? About us not seeing you? Partly, yes. You all froze me in time as mom, a role, a function, a character in your life stories, rather than recognizing me as Martha, a woman with her own dreams, opinions, preferences, and growth. Emma was quiet for a moment, absorbing this. I want to see you, the real you now. I want to know who Martha Sullivan is. I smiled. I'd like that very much. Tell me about your painting, she said, her interest genuine now. Lily mentioned you've gotten really good. As I described my watercolor journey, Emma listened attentively, asking thoughtful questions. When I mentioned the potential Italy trip, her eyes lit up. Mom, that's incredible. You have to go. And you have to send me pictures of everything you buy. Paint there. Martha reaching across the table to squeeze Emma's hand. I will, I promised. And maybe you could tell me more about your work? Not just the promotions and achievements, but what you love about it, what challenges you. She grinned. I could talk about digital marketing strategy for hours. Are you sure you want to unleash that? I'm sure, I said sincerely. I want to know what lights you up, what you're passionate about. For the next hour, she spoke animatedly about her projects, her ideas, her frustrations. I asked questions that showed genuine interest rather than just polite attention. By the time we left, both carrying plants for our respective homes, the distance between us had narrowed considerably. Scene shifts to a film being projected on a wall in Martha's condo. Lily sits beside her on the sofa. "This is the documentary I was telling you about," Lily explained, as images of vibrant street art filled my living room wall. "I was the assistant editor, but they let me direct a few of the interview segments." I watched, genuinely impressed by the artistry of both, the subjects and the filmmaking. "It's beautiful, Lily, so vibrant and honest." Of my 3 children, Lily had always been the most emotionally expressive, the most naturally empathetic. After our group conversation, she texted daily, not just brief check-ins, but thoughtful messages, questions about my day, photographs of interesting things she'd seen that reminded her of me. For our one-on-one meeting, she'd asked to come to my condo and share her recent work with me. Not just the highlights reel she'd show at networking events, but the projects that meant something to her personally. Martha and Lily sitting close together, the film playing in background. "You know what I realized after your dinner?" Lily said, turning slightly to face me. "I've been telling stories professionally for years, but I stopped listening to the most important story in my life. Yours." I tilted my head. "What do you mean?" "I document other people's lives, their struggles, their transformations. I find the narrative threads that make audiences care about strangers." She gestured to the film still playing. "But I never applied that same curiosity or attention to what you were going through after retirement, after we all moved away." Lily pauses the film, turning fully toward Martha. "I didn't ask about your dreams, your fears, your daily experiences. I just assumed your story had, I don't know, I reached some kind of static conclusion. Mom raised kids. Mom worked hard. The end. Many people make that assumption about older women," I said softly, "that our stories have already reached their most interesting points." "But that's not true at all," Lily insisted. "You're having this whole renaissance, new home, new friends, new passions. It's like the hero's journey, but society doesn't usually frame women's lives that way, especially older women's lives." I smiled at her filmmaker's perspective. "Perhaps you should make a documentary about that someday." "Maybe I will," she said, thoughtfully. "But right now, I just want to hear more about your journey. The real stuff, not just the highlights." Martha and Lily moving to the balcony with glasses of wine. As the evening deepened into night, Lily and I talked, really talked, in a way we hadn't in years. I told her about the loneliness after retirement, the way I'd felt increasingly invisible, not just to my children, but to society at large. I described the moment I'd realized I had no idea who I was outside of my roles as mother and nurse. She listened intently, occasionally wiping away tears. "I'm so sorry, Mom," she said when I finished. "I should have been there for you during that transition." "We can't change the past," I replied gently, "but we can choose a different future." "I want that," she said firmly. "I want to be part of your story going forward. Not just as your daughter, but as someone who sees you, who celebrates what you're becoming." Night has fallen, lights twinkling on the lake below. "And I want to be part of yours," I told her. "Not as the background character who offers unconditional support without asking for anything in return, but as someone who engages with you authentically, as an equal." She nodded, understanding. "It's going to take practice, isn't it? For all of us, breaking old patterns." "Most worthwhile things do," I agreed. "But I believe we can create something better, something truer." Scene transitions to Martha's watercolor class. She's painting confidently as her instructor observes. "You've made remarkable progress, Martha," David, my instructor, commented as he surveyed my latest landscape. "There's a confidence in your brushwork that wasn't there a few months ago." I smiled, making a small adjustment to the hillside I was rendering. "I feel more confident in general these days. The past 2 weeks had been a period of cautious rebuilding with my children. Text messages had become more frequent, more personal. Phone calls lasted longer and delved deeper. Michael had sent photos of his guitar. Emma had introduced me to Zoe properly over video chat. Lily had shared rough cuts of her new projects, asking for my honest opinion. Small steps, tentative efforts. At seeing and being seen. Martha walking home from class, stopping to chat with neighbors. As I made my way back to my condo, I reflected on how much had changed in 6 months. The lottery win had sparked the transformation, certainly, giving me the financial freedom to explore new possibilities. But the real changes had come from within. I had finally given myself permission to exist as more than a supporting character in other people's lives. I had claimed space, demanded respect, pursued joy without apology. In my watercolor class, David often talked about negative space, the empty areas around and between the subject matter that give shape and meaning to what's being depicted. For decades, I had been the negative space in my family's composition, defining and supporting them while remaining largely undefined myself. Now I was painting my own picture, filling the canvas with my own colors, shapes, and textures. And paradoxically, by claiming that independent identity, I had created the possibility of more authentic connection with my children. Martha entering her condo, checking her phone. A group text from my children lit up my screen. Family dinner this Sunday? We could try that new place by the lake. Our treat. I smiled, typing back. I'd like that very much. Then I set my phone aside and picked up my paintbrush again. The canvas before me was a commission. Eleanor had asked me to paint a small landscape of the community garden for her anniversary. My first paid artwork. As I mixed colors and tested brush strokes, I felt a deep contentment. Not because everything had been resolved with my children, we still had much work to do, many conversations to have, many patterns to reshape, but because regardless of how those relationships evolved, I knew who I was now. Martha painting confidently, the lake view visible through her windows, Martha Sullivan. Watercolor artist, community gardener, book lover, friend, mother, and so much more still waiting to be discovered. The lottery hadn't just changed my financial status, it had given me the chance to reclaim my life, to insist that my story wasn't over, wasn't static, wasn't merely a footnote in someone else's narrative, and that, more than the millions in my bank account, was the real jackpot. Scene opens 1 year later. Martha's condo has subtle changes, more artwork on the walls, including her own paintings, family photos that weren't there before, a new comfortable reading chair by the window. It's remarkable how quickly a year can pass when you're truly living instead of merely existing. The seasons had cycled through their changes, summer fading to autumn, winter's stillness giving way to spring's renewal, and now summer again, wrapping the lake in golden light and warmth. I stood on my balcony, coffee in hand, watching early. Morning kikers glide across the water. In an hour, I'd need to leave for the gallery. My first exhibition was opening tonight, a collection of watercolors capturing the lake through its seasonal transformations. David, my instructor turned mentor, had connections with a small local gallery and had convinced the owner to take a chance on a promising new talent. At 63, being called a new talent made me laugh, but it was accurate in its way. The woman I had become over the past 18 months was, in many respects, new, not just to others but to myself. Martha's phone rings. It's Lily. Morning, Mom. Just checking you're not having pre-exhibition jitters? Lily's voice was bright, genuinely concerned. I smiled. Some butterflies, but the good kind. Excited more than nervous. The gallery looks amazing. Michael sent pictures last night after they finished hanging everything. She paused. I'm so sorry I can't be there tonight. This film festival scheduling is brutal. Don't apologize. I'm proud of you for being selected. My response was genuine, without the silent hurt that might have colored it in the past. We'll celebrate when you're back next month. Martha moving through her condo, stopping to touch. A framed photograph. The photograph on my bookshelf was new, taken 6 months ago during our first proper family vacation in decades. The four of us stood on a beach in Florida, arms around each other, squinting into the sunset. Patricia had taken it during our visit, capturing a moment of connection that felt both familiar and entirely new. That trip had been Michael's idea. Surprisingly. We should go somewhere together, he'd suggested during one of our monthly family dinners. Not for a holiday or special occasion, just to spend time together. Emma and Lily had agreed immediately. I'd watched, slightly amazed as they coordinated schedules, researched locations, made arrangements, all without my input or management. They'd planned everything, down to activities that incorporated my interests alongside theirs. It wasn't perfect. Old patterns occasionally surfaced, Michael taking charge without consulting others, Emma growing impatient with indecision, Lily getting lost in documenting moments rather than experiencing them. But there was a new awareness, a willingness to recognize and adjust rather than fall unconsciously into familiar roles. Martha gathering her things, preparing to leave. My phone buzzed with a text from Emma. Sending good vibes for tonight. Zoe and I are catching an earlier flight. We'll make it by 7 for sure. Another from Michael. Jessica's picking up Grace and Eleanor at 5:30. I've confirmed the catering. Don't worry about anything except being brilliant. I shook my head, smiling. Some things had changed dramatically. Others had merely evolved. Michael still organized, planned, managed, but now he directed that energy toward supporting my endeavors rather than merely his own. When I'd mentioned the exhibition, he'd immediately volunteered to handle the reception details, applying his executive skills to ensure everything ran smoothly. Martha driving to the gallery, downtown buildings reflecting morning light. The small gallery was nestled between a bookstore and a cafe in Lakeshore's Arts District. As I pulled into the reserved space behind the building, I saw Vivian, the boutique owner who had helped me select my first transformation dress, unlocking the cafe's back door. "Today's the big day," she called, waving excitedly. "I'm closing early so my staff and I can all attend. We're so proud of you, Martha." These connections, Vivian, Grace, Eleanor, the garden committee, my book club friends, were as vital to my new life as the rekindled relationships with my children. They saw me clearly from the beginning, accepting me as I was rather than as they needed me to be. Inside the gallery, Martha meets with the owner, looking at her displayed artwork. "We've had significant interest already," Julian, the gallery owner, informed me as we walked through the space. "The local arts magazine is sending a reviewer, and several serious collectors have called asking about your work." I nodded, trying to absorb the reality of the moment. 24 of my paintings hung on these walls, each representing hours of concentration, discovery, and joy. The largest piece, prominently displayed on the back wall, was a triptych of the lake at dawn, midday, and dusk, the changing light revealing different aspects of the same landscape. "Your family has been wonderfully supportive," Julian continued, adjusting the lighting slightly. "Your son is quite the organizer." I smiled. He's always been good at making things happen. "And your daughter, Emma, is it? Designed a beautiful digital catalog of your work. Very professional." "She's in digital marketing," I explained, pride warming my voice. "She insisted on creating the online presence for the exhibition." Martha alone in the gallery, walking slowly among her displayed paintings. Each painting contained pieces of my journey. The early, tentative works showing hesitant brush strokes and safe color choices. The middle period revealing growing confidence and experimentation. The recent pieces demonstrating a distinctive style that was uniquely mine. David had described my work as contemplative with an unexpected boldness, a description that could apply equally to the artist herself. The woman who had begun painting 18 months ago and the woman preparing for her first exhibition were connected by more than time. The evolution visible on these walls paralleled my own inner transformation. Martha's phone rings. It's Michael. "Hey, Mom, how are you feeling?" His voice had a gentleness that had developed over the past year. A little overwhelmed, honestly. Seeing everything displayed like this makes it real in a way it wasn't before. "You deserve this moment," he said firmly. "Your work is incredible." "Thank you, Michael." The simple exchange would have been unimaginable 2 years ago. My son calling spontaneously to check on my emotional state, offering genuine praise for my creative endeavors. "Jessica and I were thinking," he continued, "maybe after the exhibition closes you might want to come to Vermont with us. There's an artists' community near the property we're considering for the wedding. Thought you might find it inspiring." "I'd like that," I said, meaning it. "And how are the wedding plans coming along?" "Actually, that's the other reason I called. We've been talking, and we'd like your input on some things. Not just the mother of the groom stuff, but your actual opinion. Jessica really values your perspective." Martha sitting near a window in the gallery, sunlight streaming in. After we hung up, I sat quietly for a moment, absorbing the subtle significance of the conversation. Not long ago, Michael would have made decisions independently, presenting them as fait accompli. Now he was actively seeking my perspective, not out of obligation, but genuine respect. The changes in our relationship hadn't happened overnight. There had been missteps, old patterns reasserting themselves, moments of frustration on both sides. But the effort had been consistent, the intention clear, to build something authentic from the ruins of what had been taken for granted. Time. Laps showing the gallery filling with visitors for the evening exhibition. By 6:30, the gallery was buzzing with activity. Staff arranged wine glasses and hors d'oeuvres while Julian made final adjustments to the lighting. I'd gone home briefly to change into a simple but elegant navy blue dress, another selection from Vivian's boutique, and arrived back just as the first guests began to enter. Grace and Eleanor arrived with Jessica, all three chattering excitedly. My book club friends came as a group, presenting me with a journal bound in handmade paper for your next artistic journey. David brought several other artists from the community center, introducing me as our resident late bloomer who's rapidly outpacing the rest of us. Martha greeting guests, occasionally glancing toward the door. At precisely 7 o'clock, Emma and Zoe rushed in, slightly breathless from their race from the airport. "Mom, this is amazing!" Emma embraced me tightly, then stepped back to gesture at the crowded gallery. "Look at all these people here to see your work." Zoe, who had become a warm presence in our family gatherings, beamed proudly. "The online catalog has had over 1,000 views already. People are really connecting with your perspective." As we spoke, Michael appeared at my elbow, champagne flutes in hand. "Ladies, a toast is in order, to the artist of the hour." The small family group raising glasses together. "To Mom," Emma said, her voice carrying genuine pride, "who reminded us that it's never too late to discover new parts of yourself." "And who taught us," Michael added, "that seeing someone, really seeing them, is the greatest gift you can give." I felt tears threatening but managed to keep them at bay. "Thank you for being here. It means everything to have you with me tonight." "We wouldn't be anywhere else," Emma said firmly. Martha is called away to speak with potential buyers. Throughout the evening, I moved between worlds, answering questions about my artistic process from interested patrons, introducing my children to my new friends, watching as these previously separate parts of my life intertwined and connected. Julian appeared at my side looking pleased. 8 paintings sold already, including the triptych. "Martha, this is exceptional for an opening night." I nodded, still processing the reality of strangers valuing my work enough to purchase it, to hang it in their homes, to live with these pieces of my soul. The reviewer from the arts magazine would like a few words, Julian continued. And then, perhaps a short speech. People are asking about the artist behind these remarkable landscapes. Martha speaking to a small crowd gathered in the center of the gallery. Thank you all for coming tonight, I began, my voice steadier than I expected. A year and a half ago, I'd never held a paintbrush with any serious intent. I was defined by other roles, mother, nurse, caretaker, all identities I cherished, but which sometimes left little room for discovering who Martha might be beyond those responsibilities. I glanced at my children, standing together near the front of the group, their faces showing a mixture of pride and reflection. An unexpected change in circumstances gave me the freedom to explore that question. The paintings you see around you are part of my answer, each one a discovery, a conversation with myself about who I am becoming. Camera panning across the gallery walls, showing Martha's evolution as an artist. Someone recently described my work as contemplative with an unexpected boldness. I rather like that description, not just for the paintings, but for the painter herself. Soft laughter rippled through the crowd. I believe it's never too late to discover new aspects of yourself, to cultivate curiosity about who you might yet become. And I've learned that true connection with others, whether family, friends, or community, begins with honoring your own, authentic self. My gaze found Michael, Emma, and Zoe standing together, listening intently. I'm deeply grateful to everyone who has supported this journey. My teacher, my friends, my children who have learned to see me in new ways, and I them. Martha raising her glass in a toast, to new beginnings, at any age. The crowd echoed the sentiment, glasses raised. As conversations resumed around me, I felt a profound sense of completion, not as an ending, but as a circle connecting past, present, and future in a way that honored all parts of my journey. Later that evening, Martha alone on her balcony, the exhibition over, looking at the moonlight on the lake. The exhibition had been more successful than anyone anticipated. Nearly half. My paintings sold, commissions requested, future shows discussed. The financial aspect barely registered compared to the joy of creating something meaningful that resonated with others. My lottery winnings had made this new life possible, providing the freedom to explore, to try, to risk failure without catastrophic consequences. But money alone couldn't create meaning or purpose or authentic connection. Those had come from harder, deeper work, the courage to look honestly at painful patterns, to speak uncomfortable truths, to demand more from relationships that mattered. Martha holding a small sketchbook, making preliminary drawings for new work. Martha Sullivan, who had once measured her worth by what she could do for others, now understood her intrinsic value. The woman who had accepted crumbs of attention from her children now required, and received, genuine engagement. The nurse, who had defined herself by her capacity to care for others, now tended to her own needs with equal dedication. Not perfect, not finished. Still evolving, but authentic, whole, seen. Final shot of Martha beginning a new painting, her face peaceful and determined, as the sunrise begins to illuminate the lake. When people asked if winning the lottery had changed my life, I always gave the same answer. The money hadn't changed who I was. It had simply given me the freedom to discover who I might become. The real transformation had come from finally understanding that I was worthy of that discovery. And that revelation was worth more than any lottery jackpot. Looking for more? We've got 2 amazing stories ready for you right on screen. If this one touched you, these are absolutely worth your time. Click to watch them now. And hey, subscribe and hit that bell to never miss our latest uploads.